Hello there, this is Fiona, host and main GM for What Am I Rolling, a twice-monthly RPG one-shot podcast. This is a bonus Q&A episode to tide us over to the next one-shot, and it is indeed a very special Q&A, as this week I had the absolute pleasure of interviewing award-winning game writer Andrew E.C. Gaska. With over 2 decades of experience in comics and video game industries, it's safe to say that Drew has a long list of credits to his name. Notably, his freelance consulting work for 20th Century Fox has seen him write a number of series reference bibles, streamline in-universe canon, and create detailed timelines for legacy franchises such as Alien, Predator, and Planet of the Apes. Drew's tabletop work includes the critically acclaimed Alien role-playing game, as well as the Terminator RPG and Carbon Grey RPG. Recently, it was announced that, along with the new re-release of his graphic novel Critical Millennium: The Dark Frontier, Drew would also be working on an RPG for Critical Millennium, both scheduled to be out in the second quarter of next year. It was great to finally talk to Drew about his work, and how his writing really immerses players and GMs in these iconic sci-fi series. I highly recommend checking out his work, especially the Terminator RPG, as I do feel that's a little bit underrated considering how many cool game mechanics are in it. I'll put links to Drew's blog and his work in this episode's show notes.
So I'm supposed to hit leave meeting, right?
No! Oh no, please! All my anxiety comes out in one. If you wouldn't mind, could you introduce yourself? Who are you and what do you do?
Hi, I'm Andrew E.C. Gaska. I am a author and game writer. I'm the writer of the Alien role-playing game, which has won, I think, 9 awards in the past 3 years.
So many awards.
Yeah, it's hard to keep track. And that's
what a humble brag.
No, in all seriousness, I tell people that I made it 48 years of my life without a single award, and then I screwed it up.
You were so close to that milestone.
Yeah. I've written a couple of Planet of the Apes novels. I'm a franchise consultant for 20th Century Studios and Disney on Planet of the Apes, Alien, and Predator. I wrote the internal Predator Bible over at 20th Century Studios. I've written a couple of Choose Your Own Adventure graphic novels. I'm the writer of the Terminator role-playing game and a new role-playing game called Carbon Grey based on a graphic novel. My own graphic novel, Critical Millennium, came out 12 years ago, and it's gonna have a resurgence coming up shortly, which we'll talk about later. So yeah, I've been around the block.
Yeah, what a nice story. I've been around. Yes, absolutely. There is a pattern, I guess, to your stuff. It does seem very much sci-fi or sort of 80s. Was there a particular film or a genre, not even a genre, but something that got you into certainly writing in the initial stages? Was there something that you I want to now write now? Was it like a book or a film?
Well, the funny thing is that I didn't realize I was going to be a writer until I made it halfway through college. Okay. From 5 years old, I was going to be an artist. Okay. And I didn't realize what I was doing in my life, with my toys and friends, and then with role playing. And when you trace it all back, you can see this dude was a writer. I just didn't realize it. When kids would come over with their Star Wars figures and we'd all play Star Wars figures, Star Wars is the thing that started all this for me. Okay.
Right.
There'd always be some kid who has got another Luke Skywalker figure that he wants to play. So we're going to have 2 Luke Skywalkers. And I'm 7 years old. And I'm no. All right, wait. The Empire's created a clone of Luke, and we don't know which one's the real Luke. I'd make up stories for it, so it all made sense. And some friends hated me for it, and some were like, "Oh, that's cool." The first time I role played Dungeons and Dragons, it was a disaster. The party, I was a player, not a GM, and the party turned against each other, and they all killed each other. And I quietly hid in the shadows and decided I would GM from then on. So growing up, I was in special art programs that you had to have certain grades for and stuff like that. And what do you call it? I always thought I was going to be an artist. In high school, I was in advanced art programs, and I was like, this is it. This is where I'm going. I went to the School of Visual Arts for college, and I was one of the best artists in my high school, but everybody who goes to art college was the best artist in their high school. Now it's a new level, and I just couldn't cut that level. Okay. And we were required to take a writing class as part of I have a degree in comics, of all things. It's technically a fine arts degree with a concentration in comics, but Denny O'Neil from Batman fame, he was in charge of Batman for 15 years. He's did a lot of groundbreaking things in comics since the 60s, right? And he passed away a couple of years ago. He was my writing teacher at the school. And my parents ran out of money and couldn't afford for me to keep going to college. And I was at a crossroads because I knew, you know what, I'm not as good at this art thing as I thought I was. I don't know what I want to do. So rather than taking out loans at that point, I decided I was going to drop out for a while. I eventually went back and finished it all. And I went to Denny and I told him, I was like, listen, I'm very sorry. I'm not going to be in your class next semester. I love this class, but my parents can't afford it. And he says, no. I'm going to take you out and tutor you privately. And we're going to get you a script that's going to go in the drawer at DC. Now, I don't know if you know what that term means in the drawer, but
go for it.
Basically the way it used to work is, I don't know if you ever read comics in the 80s or anything like that, but like comics 80s, you'd be in the middle of a storyline and then suddenly there'd be this random story that was a single issue and you'd be like, what the hell is this? And then the storyline would continue after that. And that's because the creative team on the main book fell behind.
Right.
And they said, pull this out of the drawer, get someone to draw this and it'll be the next thing. So we worked on a Catwoman script together and they bought it for the drawer, but Catwoman never fell behind. So it never came out. But it was Denny who made me realize I was a writer. But I thought, I'm going to write comics. This is my career, comics. Okay. And I wound up getting work from Rockstar Games, doing graphics and stuff for Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption and stuff like that. I worked for them for 17 years, starting with GTA 3 all the way through Red Dead Redemption. And one day in like 2005, I went to a comic shop just to, get comics because I was still a comic fan. And there was a new Planet of the Apes comic on the shelf. And I saw it. And I thought, oh, wow, this is great. Who's doing this? Marvel, DC? And it was somebody called Mr. Comics. And I was like, if Mr. fucking Comics can get a license, why can't I?
Right.
And so I had the money at the time because I was making money from Rockstar.
Yeah.
So I hired an entertainment lawyer and decided to try to get some licenses. And I went after Star Trek. I went after Planet of the Apes. And I was a fan of Space 1999. So I went after that as well. So an unknown company at the time called IDW, which is a huge comic company now. Yeah. They outbid me on Star Trek. So they wound up getting the Star Trek license. Right. But Mr. Comics, their comic series was great, but they never collected it and sent it to bookstores. And Fox was not happy that had happened. So they decided not to renew their license with them. And they said that, come to licensing expo, we'll talk and maybe you can get the license from us. So my entertainment lawyer and I go, and we meet with them in licensing expo. That was in New York then. And nowadays licensing expo every year is in Vegas. I start explaining them what I want to do because I want to do comics, graphic novels, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, whoa, wait. You want to do comics? We're not happy with comics after what happened with Mr. Comics. We don't want to do comics right now. Right. And I'm like, I've been working to get this happen. So I'm like, well, when I say comics, I kind of mean a novel with paintings, like sort of like that Aliens Tribes things you guys did in 1991. And Debbie Olshan was the woman who was the licensing exec then. And she goes, Aliens Tribes is the favorite project I've ever worked on. You have your license. Nice. So I pulled this out of my butt. Yeah. And I was like, great. Okay. I don't write novels, so I can't write this now. This was my thinking was. I said, I can plot it, but my friends I had at the time wanted to be novelists. So I said, guys, you want to write this? And, I'll plot it with you. And we started working on it. And how do I say this? They wound up leaving the project because they couldn't handle it. Okay. Right. Okay. And they left me holding the bag that I paid this license for. And, we did this work. I did all this work. I've been paying for paintings and stuff. And now we had no one to write this. And I was like, I guess I'm going to try and be a novelist. Right. And luckily it didn't suck. This book was Conspiracy of the Planet of the Apes. It came out in 2011, right when Rise of the Planet of the Apes was coming out. And it did well. And so eventually I wound up doing a sequel called Death of the Planet of the Apes with Titan, because I no longer had the rights anymore to do it myself. So Titan hired me to do it. And then I thought, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a novelist. And that's then amazing. A couple of years after that, I got a call from Josh Izzo, who was then the franchise director at Fox. And he said, hey, we're trying to figure out the Planet of the Apes timeline for a project we're working on. And I read your book. I think you know this stuff better than us. Do you want to be a consultant? Right. I was like, who says no to that? Yeah. Oh, I guess you're calling an expert. I must be the expert. Yeah. So I became the consultant on that, which led to consulting on Alien and Predator. And Josh's successor over there, Steve Zerlin, said to me, he was happy with what I'd done on the Predator Bible, said to me that if I can find any category that's not been taken in publishing and find a company that wants to take that, they'll recommend me as the writer because I know the stuff, Right. So I shopped the idea of an Alien role-playing game around for 18 months. And every company I went to was like, it's a one-hit wonder thing. It'll never sustain itself.
How interesting.
And again, the concept is so limited. I mean, it was every time you're going to be like, and then there was an alien, you know? And I was like, the universe is, I'm like,
What?
the universe is much bigger. Yeah, I know. I'm like, the universe is much bigger than that. There's been 40 years of graphic novels and all this stuff. And there's all these things we can tap into. And no one would listen to me. So I'm good friends with Joe LaFavi. He runs Genuine Entertainment. He basically, he's younger than me. He's like maybe 10 years younger than me. I can't remember exactly, but I always tell people when I grow up, I want to be Joe LaFavi, because Joe connects licenses with the right publishers and make sure that, like, you know, these guys really love Alien. They'll be the ones who do the Alien. He makes this stuff happen. Okay. And so I went to him all frustrated and I said, Joe, I can't find anybody. And I really want to do this Alien thing. And Joe had just started talking to, he'd been watching the rise of a company called Free League. And he was like, hey, Free League, I like your stuff. I want to work with you. What's your top 10 licenses that you want? And the top 2 were Alien and Blade Runner, which, you know, Free League went and did a Blade Runner game after this, right?
Yes.
So Joe had just had that conversation with them 2 days before I called them and said, I can't find anyone to do Alien.
Wow. There you go. That's sort of serendipitous moments. All comes together.
So within 60 days, they had the contract and I was going to write this thing. But I was only supposed to write the reference stuff, the history stuff, you know, all the canon stuff, because I knew that stuff. I wasn't supposed to write any rules, which I still haven't written rules. And I wasn't supposed to write adventures either. I was just going to write the canon stuff. And so as I'm writing the canon stuff, I have a flavor to the way I wrote it, where it's got this attitude and, you know, basically tells you, you know, basically don't be careful what's hiding in the trunk and things like that, you know. And so they asked me to go through the rules and make it, quote, sexy, end quote, a little bit, you know. Put
have that voice going throughout. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it all matches, right? And then as I did that, and then whoever was going to do the next adventure, the first adventure, which wound up being Chariot of the Gods, either they bailed or they were like, oh, I have no idea, because I wasn't, you know, I'm not part of Free League, you know, I'm just a freelancer. And so Free League said, hey, do you want to take a stab at this? And I was like, well, I did Game Master for almost 20 years. I never thought I'd be writing an adventure, but I also never thought I'd be writing a novel, and that worked out. So
yeah, each part of your career is like, sure, let's have a go, really. That's so cool.
And that's the thing. If you don't take the chances on this stuff, you can't move ahead in this business, you know? If you immediately doubt yourself, you're not going to get anywhere. And I'm not saying be arrogant and go in and say, oh, I can do anything. No. I mean, when I decided I was going to write that novel, I went and reread all my favorite novels of all time to look for, how did they describe these things? What did they do here? How did they have me sitting on the edge of my seat? You know, research is a big part of everything I do.
Yeah, and that's definitely what's needed for stuff like Alien, for stuff like Terminator, which, as you said, certainly with the Alien stuff, as I've sort of looked through other interviews with you saying, like, because there's so much lore, there's so much on it, right? And there is so much about getting it in the right order and getting it right, because people will know. So I can imagine that, like you said, like with Planet of the Apes, all this thing, going back and doing that research is so important. So then obviously Alien and Planet of the Apes, so they were like stuff that were for you growing up, those are your favorite things, because those were the ones that you pitched license for, right? Going back to that when you were thinking about doing comic book stuff.
Well, I mean, my top have always been Star Wars and Star Trek.
Right.
Okay. I couldn't get Star Trek from IDW, and I wasn't stupid enough to think I could get Star Wars. You know what I mean? I mean, I was just nobody.
It's not stupid. It's being realistic, perhaps. How's that?
Yes, that's good. You know, I mean, I was a nobody who was going to form a company just to do this back then. There's no way I would have gotten Star Wars. Star Wars is tied up with Dark Horse and you know, all these bigger companies. So yes, I realized that was off the table back then. I'm hoping that, you know, as my career moves forward, that won't be off the table.
No, absolutely. Well, then this is good. If we were okay to circle back then to your game mastering then. So like you said, as that first session of D&D, you're a player, everyone kills each other. Yeah, rocks fall, everyone dies, everyone kills themselves in a party. You go into the shadows and then you become a game master. So have you been one of those people who's been a forever game master? Have you done lots of different systems? Because it sounds like when you're saying, I've never really written an adventure before, was it just purely published stuff before you got into this foray of writing? Okay. I
never wrote an adventure for public consumption. Okay.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
Because when I write my adventures, it's like, if I gave it to you, you'd be like, I don't understand what's going on here.
Right.
But it all makes sense in my head with the notes in the scrawled in the corners and stuff like that.
I see.
So I was like, okay, how am I going to do this in a way? And here's the thing. Here's the thing that I don't think a lot of GMs realize. when you play with a lot of the same people over and over again, you understand those people and you know how to cater things specifically to what they're going to do. And it's not that you're railroading them, but I know that Jason's going to do this at this point, so I'm going to put this in here and let this spiral out of that. When you're doing it for public consumption, you don't know that. And I had stopped game mastering like I think 15 years before I wrote this thing, just because I didn't have any time anymore. Sure. I didn't, or game master. It was once I started working for Rockstar, my life just became super busy all the time.
Well, let's start off with Terminator then, if that's okay. Because like you said, you sort of get into Alien, you do all those things, and then you sort of gone and then now done Terminator, which is a completely different franchise in the sense of like, obviously still 80s, still sci-fi, still dystopian to an extent. How was approaching that subject and that source material for certainly the source book compared to your previous projects?
Terminator was a unique challenge, and that's because the license was for Terminator 1 and the Terminator 1 comics. Okay. Terminator is one of those licenses that like the people who made Terminator 3 are not at all the people who made Terminator 2. Okay. Not even the same production company type thing. Okay. Because their licenses, what happened was the company that had Terminator rights, Carlton, I think it was, the company that had it back in the 80s folded. Right. And when they did, the rights for Terminator got split up in like 5 different ways. So like when we see a new Terminator project, it's not necessarily from the last people from that did the last Terminator project we see. So the rights are broken up. So it was like, okay, you got to do this using these T1 stuff, but we may get the rights to do other stuff for Terminator. So we also don't want to contradict the stuff that's in the other things. Right. So how do we talk about this stuff without talking about this stuff? That's what it came down to. I see. And it was a challenge because like with Alien, I was just like, I'll pull this from this graphic novel here and this here. And oh, look, these stories are almost similar. I can connect them and blah, 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 blah. Now I had to do that without doing it.
Yeah. So completely different sort of mindset in terms of preparing and stuff.
Yeah. I think it came out good. I'm really happy with the way it turned out, and with the expansions that we've been working on, I think it's building the universe in a really good way. And like one of my favorite things that I think I've done for Terminator is make sense out of a lot of stuff that didn't make sense. Right. Because you go to Dark Horse's comics, and every Terminator has a serial number, which is a specific serial number. Okay. But then you go to some other things, and somebody thinks that T-800 is the name of that Terminator. Right. It's not, though. It's the series that he is. So I established the make, model, series, serial number for this is how you do a Terminator's name. I worked all that stuff out for it. So it all like people like, oh, that makes sense now. And it's something that needed to be made sense, and I think that's the benefit of doing these things, because like you can clarify stuff that just needed it. And then these role-playing books often become the source books for people writing the next novels and whatnot.
Exactly.
It's literally what's happening with Alien right now. They're giving those books to the next licensor and saying, here's your source book. And that's how it happened with the West End Star Wars game in the 80s. When Timothy Zahn started writing Star Wars novels in the 90s, he would call Lucasfilm and be like, well, what's this gun called? And what's this called? And they're like, I don't know. Here, take this role-playing book.
Yeah, it's all the info's there. They've documented it all. They're nerds. It's fine.
Even though like all that older stuff is now considered legends and not part of the current continuity, the guns are still the same. Like Han's Blaster is still called the DL-44, and that was first called that in the role-playing game from 1987. Yeah, 87, right? Yeah, that's what I said. 87. Yeah, I thought I said 97 for a second. What do you call it?
What year is this? Yeah.
What? Yeah, I've just traveled from the future.
Oh, yeah, this is you're living your own Terminator through this interview.
What's the date? It's the 4th. What year? Yeah, so it's great to be able to contribute to these things because it's being part of these things that were that were important to me as a child. Right.
Yeah, and important to a lot of people growing up and stuff. I was reading the reviews of the Terminator RPG, and some people are like, "Oh my goodness, I've been waiting for something like this to play these sort of stories." Which I think, and I hadn't actually considered it, because I will admit I am more of an Alien fan myself. But when I was thinking back about what I know about Terminator, and then looking through stories, I thought actually the stories that you can create. So this idea, obviously, of a futuristic war, but being able to go back and stuff. And I think at one point there's a mention about like running into versions of yourself from alternate timelines.
Right. Yeah, that was I had fun with that.
Right. And I just like that instantly opens, because that feels like something like instantly is like, oh, that's going to be interesting for players, because players always muck up and you're like, well, who is this person? It's not me, but it is me. And I just, for me, that's the sort of story that I do want to tell. And so I was like, there's so much here actually that I hadn't considered, because I just, for me, unfortunately, Terminator passed me by, but I was like, well, actually, there's so much here that I could take forward from it. So yeah, no, I really enjoyed reading it through and going, oh, there's like bits I can do, and introducing that sort of these sort of stories to a new generation of people, because unfortunately it's one of those things where like maybe there are people nowadays who haven't seen the original Terminator or haven't read the original comics and stuff, so having a role-playing game where they can get into it and then have some source material to watch at the same time actually it's such a nice experience in a way that you were introducing it into an accessible way, perhaps.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. And I'm really happy to hear that you picked up on that, the particular thing about the alternate you thing, because I had so much fun with that. I was thinking, oh man, what if someone dies in the middle of a mission,
right?
And they needed that player's character. I mean, they could pick up somebody else like a civilian or something and work that into it. But wouldn't it be great if an alternate them shows up from an alternate timeline, and we made rules that explain two attributes would be flipped because you're from another timeline. And so yeah, I'm really proud of that. Thank you for noticing.
Yeah, no, because I don't know any other game that not only gives rules for that, but actually sort of encourages that. Because I think of games like maybe Doctor Who, perhaps. Obviously, I know Star Trek. In a sense, you can have like time travel sort of thing, but actually saying what happens should you run into yourself, or how to have stories with that. I just was like, that's something I've not seen before, so I just thought that was really interesting. And then to go to, say, Carbon Grey, which is obviously based on a graphic novel series and stuff, that's slightly different. Because I guess because for Terminator, obviously you've got films and graphics, and then this is just I will admit I don't know much about Carbon Grey. I wonder, could you describe what Carbon Grey is for people who might not have heard of it?
Real quick before we do that, I just want to say that Alien is from Free League, Terminator's from Nightfall Games, and Carbon Grey is from Magnetic Press Play.
Yeah, 3 separate companies. Yeah, you've been incredibly busy.
Just want to clarify we're not all talking about the same company.
Yeah, not at all. Yeah, you've been incredibly busy writing all these things. But yeah, Carbon Grey, if you could describe what it is for people who have not heard of it before.
Absolutely. It's like a diesel punk alternate World War I, and so the countries' names are they're not France and Spain and things like that, but they're things they're like, oh, okay, that's supposed to be France. It's that type of thing. Mm-hmm. And reality is basically breaking down in this thing. So there's things called continuity fluxes. Okay, mm-hmm. And what that is like, it's a rip in time and space that might bring in something from another time. So you'll see people, even though it's World War I, people might have like assault rifles that have laser sights and stuff like that, because there's weird stuff that's just being brought into the wrong time period here. Mm-hmm. And history's being messed up. The whole graphic novel revolves around these two sisters that are key to keeping reality from breaking apart. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. So obviously we don't center on that in the game. No. We center on the broader world. Carbon Grey is based on West End Games system, okay? Mm-hmm. The D6 system from the 1980s that started with the Star Wars game back then. It's not the current Star Wars rules. I was a big fan of that stuff, and when I was working with Magnetic Press's parent company, Lionforge, they decided that they wanted that we're going to open a game department, okay? And they said, hey, you know games, right? Didn't you work for a game company? And at this point, I hadn't done the Alien thing yet.
No.
They were remembering Rockstar Games and not realizing that's not tabletop. And I'm like, I can do that.
That's me. Yeah. What do you need? Yeah.
Because I was like, I still want to do this, right? Yeah, at that point, I had just gotten, a couple of months before that, I had gotten the Alien deal through Joe. Mm-hmm. So none of that had been written yet. It hadn't come out yet. And I got the job at Lionforge, and I was like, okay, so I guess I'm going to be doing other role-playing stuff, right? So I said, okay, so what's our rule system? And they're like, what?
Oh, no.
I'm like, all right, well, we need like 2.5 years, and we need a budget to create a rule system. Mm-hmm. They're like, what? No, we don't want to do that. I'm like, okay, then we need to get rights to a rule system that we can use. Let me see what I can find. And I immediately wanted the West End game system because I love those rules. I feel like it's the grandfather of modern gaming, because the whole dice pool system, a lot of the things that you see in these new games, like they're much more streamlined than it was in the West End game.
Yes.
But you can see clearly this is where this came from. So at the time, I did not realize that the people that owned it were right in front of my face, because I didn't know that they were tied to Drive-Thru RPG, because it would have been really simple to just contact Drive-Thru RPG and say, hey.
Yeah, that would have been more efficient, right?
Yes. So instead, I wound up doing this internet search, and then I found the Twitter account of the guy who used to own the company but passed away a few years ago. And I wound up tracking down his sister, and I wound up doing all this stupid stuff to wind up get back to Drive Through RPG. I was like, oh, never mind.
You went on your own little hero's journey, but you didn't learn anything.
Yeah, no, I learned just look for the most obvious thing first, dumbass.
That's fair. What a great lesson.
But yeah, so we have a license with them to create stuff with the West End Games logo, because the D6 system is open license, but we didn't want to just use the generic system. We wanted to be able to draw upon the library of stuff that they actually did and have their logo on it, and have it be something that was respectful of what they have done in the past, because they had done so much in the 90s, you know? And so Carbon Gray is the first game that we've done with that rule system. And we have lots of stuff planned. Unfortunately, you'll have to have me back on probably in January, because I can tell you a lot more stuff then of what's
no worries. Yeah, well, don't worry. I will hit you up for that, Drew. That's not a problem. Because again, I've only just come across Carbon Gray today when I was doing my research. But yeah, the system is really interesting, because again, I know obviously you get your dice codes, and so having that number of D6s in your pool, but then when you roll them, adding it up, the value up, and seeing if that beats something. I actually thought that was more interesting than some of the other dice pool systems, which is you roll your D6s and then it's like, oh, you get a number of sixes. That's a success. I actually prefer the adding up stuff.
Really? Okay.
Well, because I think it's more exciting, right? Because you could roll really terribly or really well, rather than just going, only one of those dice was really important, which is the D6. So I was like, actually, that's quite good. I quite like that idea of like, I just make it and stuff, and then having the margins of success as well. So yeah, really,
that's good, because like that is the core of what the West End system was. Okay, that was the one rule I was like, we can't change this. I don't want to change this. Okay. No. Now what we did is we did do the D6MV, which is the magnetic variant of D6.
Right. Yeah, you changed it slightly for this. Yeah.
We didn't change that part at all, because that part is perfect. Okay. Yeah. But what we did there, like the initiative rules and things like that, there was too much math going on. Yeah. That was slowing down combat. So we came up with simpler ways to get around that. And so far the fan base has been like, oh, this works better. This works better. So yeah. I think we successfully modernized the West End game system while staying true to the core of it.
And you definitely say in the book, saying for those people who've played the previous ones, so you always acknowledge like, we appreciate it used to be. And I think that's really nice, actually, that you're not hiding it or anything like that. You're just being like, hey, we know it used to be this, but we've done this, and actually saying what the changes are. Because sometimes, when you get like those little erratas at the back and you're like entirely writing, you're like, I don't know what has changed. Here you can actually see where you've changed it. And I definitely was like, oh, it feels very transparent. It feels like, I don't know, accessible. I don't know. It just feels like you're opening people in. So it is for everyone. It's for new players and for those people who remember the old system. So yeah, really.
And that's really important to me too, because it's like, I don't want anybody to think, oh, they're changing my system. I want them to know, no, we're respecting your system, but we're also trying to modernize this here too. So don't think we're trying to screw you over or anything like that. I respect this stuff, and I want to bring more to it. I don't want to destroy what came before.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, you want to build on it and acknowledge where you come from. I get that. I get that a lot. So yeah, it's kind of been a big year for you. Not only have you got the last sort of Heart of Darkness, so the last in this sort of trilogy for Alien coming out. You've also got you've had Terminator's just come out, and Carbon Gray is coming out. So you've got a lot of fingers and a lot of pies, a lot of plates spinning. Yes. I guess. How do you work in the nicest way? Like, I'm guessing you're just incredibly motivated, but is there like not even a method to your madness? Is it just like, today I'm going to just work on this, or do you spend weeks at a time? Like, how do you go from doing all these projects? I guess it seems like a really stupid question to ask a freelancer who must do this all the time, but for me, it just feels like you've done such an amazing, a lot of work. I don't know how you'd have time to do all these amazing projects, and probably more that you can't talk about.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of stuff I can't talk about too, but you're absolutely right. It's like, I mean, I'll tell you, since the pandemic started, I have been working harder than I ever have in my life, because there's all these books, opportunities. Once I started winning the awards, people are contacting me saying, hey, we want you to work in this game. I don't have to look for work now. I worked at Lionforge as senior development editor for their animation department, okay? And when the pandemic hit, they let me go because they closed my department. And I was like, what am I going to do for like a week before a billion people were like, do this freelance thing for us. So I think, I want to say this year, I've had almost a dozen books that are coming out this past year. And before that, I had a dozen books to my name before that for the 10 years of my writing career.
Right.
So it's crazy. But I usually work at least 12 hours a day. I weekends don't exist. How do I say this? I put on 30 pounds since I started working on this stuff because I don't. Yeah.
Outside no longer exists to you. Is that what you're saying? Yes. Okay, fair enough.
The funny thing is the convention circuit just started again, right? Because I used to do a lot of conventions. But I've already done more conventions this year than I normally do in a regular year. And since I started doing conventions, I've lost 12 pounds. Yeah. So it's like, okay, so I'm moving again.
Yeah. So you've got the exercise routine should you need it. You're like, yeah, I'll just do a couple more conventions. That'll do me for the rest of the year. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm so happy. I'm like, let's get back down to what we were beforehand. Sure. But in regards to the process, I would love to be able to put on a calendar, I will work on Terminator for 2 hours today, and then on Carbon Gray for a half an hour. And it's like I have this looming deadline on Carbon Gray, but this Terminator thing is burning in my brain, and I need to do this now.
Yes. Yeah.
And I know I'm smart enough at this point to know that if I don't do it now, I will never get it out as great as it's going to be if I do it now. So I got to do it. And something that has been happening a lot, and I've been trying to explain to publishers, and I think they're starting to get it with me, is that like we can't have a schedule where you need a third of it by this time, a third of it by this time, a third of it this time.
Right.
It's not going to work because what you think I'd be working on for the first third, I'm actually not writing anything. Yeah. I'm watching a ton of Terminator. I'm taking notes. I'm reading comics. I'm doing all this stuff. I don't have anything to turn into at that point. No. I have this crazy man's notebook, but online, on Google Docs, that you'll be like, what the hell is this crap? But if I don't do that, we're not going to get what we're going to get after that.
Right. Because you need to do all that prep and all that research in order then to be like, okay, this is true to the lore as you know it. Or like you can take, like you were saying before, like reading these books, you're like, okay, so that's how they describe this. That's how I should like sort of emulate that in my adventures when I'm writing them. Yeah, no, I get that.
Because of this, there's no routine. There's no rhyme or reason. It's like Suddenly I'm going to be working for 18 hours and sleeping 2 hours, and then the next day I will sleep 18 hours.
Good. I'm glad you said that. So please don't only have 2 hours sleep.
I mean, sometimes that happens too, and it's like I did all these conventions. I did San Diego Comic-Con, followed directly by Tampa Bay Comic-Con, and then I came home and had COVID, and then so I was super sick for a few weeks. And I couldn't work. And so all the projects are behind now, and then I start to feel better. I get some work done. And now then I went to, what was the next show? I went to Dragon Con, followed by Salt Lake City. I came back from Salt Lake City. I was fine. I was home for a week, did work, then went to Granite City Comic-Con. And from there straight to some other show. I'm not sure where it was. I may be confused. Salt Lake may have been the last one. Regardless of any of that nonsense.
Trust me, like when I saw you, I was like, "What date can I get you for the interview?" And I'm like, "I'm sure somewhere I'll find like an hour."
That's right. I sent you that, didn't I? Yeah, I sent you that.
I was like, "I'm glad you're getting out."
No, and I enjoy doing this. I love doing.
Of course,
yeah. I think the last show was Salt Lake. I came back from Salt Lake. Yeah, that's right. The other one was Silicon Valley. I came back from Salt Lake, and then I had pneumonia. And I've had pneumonia for the past few weeks, and I'm much better now. But oh my God, 2 weeks ago when we were supposed to have that interview, I was like, I'm not doing this.
I would not make you do it because you have pneumonia. I mean, like COVID stuff and pneumonia, not fun stuff and very serious stuff. So no, I'm very glad that we were able to reschedule on your time for that as well.
Yeah, I mean, right now I have no life. Right now I'm trying to build the future so that I can have the life I want.
Of course. Sense. If somebody wanted to get into, I mean, you've done so much in your career, like comics and graphic novels, and if somebody wanted to get into specifically writing role-playing games, writing for a franchise, where do you think they would start, or what big sort of tip would you give them if they were getting into it?
Okay, so this is an interesting question, a very interesting question, and something that I actually do panels about because people do not really understand how this works.
Right.
I have people come up to me at conventions and they're like, hey, I've been writing this Star Wars novel for the past 2 years and I want to submit it to Lucasfilm. And I'm like, they're never going to look at it.
Yeah.
And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, they don't want that. They want to see that you have written a novel for something else. And they're like, hey, that guy's novel's pretty good and he's got all these followers. Let's ask him to do a Star Wars novel. So I always tell people who are doing this, I was like, file off the serial numbers, make it your own space fantasy, change things around, remove things that are clearly too Star Wars, and put that out. Get followers, okay? Because once that comes out, and if that does well, then Lucasfilm's gonna be like, hey, that guy, kind of almost like Star Wars. We should have him write a Star Wars novel, they're never going to just be like, oh, thanks for this fan book. Yes, we're going to print this.
Yeah.
Because they don't even do the printing. It's a license to a publishing company, and they don't want submissions either. They want people who they know are in the right position already. So it's kind of a catch-22 because like, how do you ever get there if they're only going to take people who are there already? But you get there by doing your own thing and moving forward. My story is not how these things normally work. The whole, I'm going to get this license and I'm going to go after Planet Apes and stuff like that. That shouldn't have worked. It's crazy that it did, and it will never work now because the type of money that these companies want now for these things, because they know what their licenses are worth, there's no way you'll be able to pay for that out of your pocket. Yeah. Nowadays, it's all about, hey, you're a company. Okay. Do you want to do this license with us? Okay. Let's see your books. I need to know you have the money to do this. What have you done before? Are you going to be an embarrassment to us? Blah, 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 blah. This is the way it goes. And there's a vetting system that has to happen. It's not some schmuck walking off the street saying, hey, I want to do a Planet of the Apes novel anymore. And it never should have been in the first place. Honestly, the more I know about the business, I'm like, how the hell did that even happen?
Again, serendipity. That's how I see it. But I definitely see that, like having a portfolio of other work and stuff like, and building that stuff up first. Yeah, it is the way to go, right? And I definitely feel that on that front. Thank you so much, Drew, for coming to chat to me. I'm so glad we got to chat after all this time. I'm glad you are feeling better. And I honestly, when I was reading through Heart of Darkness, I've been very excited because I'm hopefully going to do all three, Chariot of the Gods, Destroyer of the Worlds, and Heart of Darkness, not all in one night, because I know that's going to kill everyone and me.
There's no way they could all be in one night. Destroyer of Worlds alone is 24 hours of play. So
absolutely, yeah. I've played in a live stream of it, and incredibly enjoyable. And I think your writing of it, of Alien and of Terminator and of Cabo Gregor, it's very evocative, and I definitely feel like there are bits in it. I'm like, I want to dig into it further. So I'll do my own research after we finish this interview. But where can we find you on social media? Where can we look for other books? And do you have any other upcoming projects that you can talk about that you'd like to signal, please? I'll give you that opportunity at this point.
So you can find me on Facebook, Andrew E. Gaska. The C is not on my personal Facebook page, but I always talk to fans. Send me a message. Don't just send me a friend request. Send me a friend request with a message that says, hey, I'm a fan who wants to talk about this. Otherwise, I'm like, who is this person and why should I friend them? Also, I have a blog. And actually, there's I talk about canon in Terminator and canon in Alien. There's actually some canon list based on the stuff that I did at 20th Century Studios over on that blog. It's roguereviewer.wordpress.com. And what do you call it? I have a Kickstarter that's going on right now. It's called Critical Millennium by Magnetic Press. Critical Millennium is a graphic novel that I wrote 12 years ago, and it is being re-released in expanded edition. The coolest thing about it is that not only is it getting expanded edition, it's getting a West End Games D6 role-playing game for it too. It's my own sci-fi dark future storyline. It's 2,000 years in the future, and humankind has pretty much messed up the entire planet. And it's not going to support us for more than another 200 years. So a couple of scientists find this rich kid who just inherited more money than God. And they convince him to put his money into funding a faster than light speed engine that can take humanity to other planets. Basically, there's government that doesn't want this to happen because they're afraid they're going to lose control of the population. There's fanatic groups who think that we were born here, we need to die here. There's terrorist things going on. It's a crazy dark universe that actually it looks at the extremes of what we have in our own society now. 12 years ago, and actually it works for now too.
It definitely works for now, I was just about to say. And that's so cool as well, that obviously something that you made and created 12 years ago and now has its own RPG. I'm sure you're keeping the licenses very close to your chest on that one. No, I was shocked when they wanted to do it. I was like, oh, okay. I mean, Critical Millennium came out and the issues sold really well. Okay. In fact, we sold out of all the issues. And then the collection came out, and unfortunately the publisher that was coming out at the time, Archaea, that was putting it out, they had just got bought by another company. And the collection and a bunch of other collections that came out at that time came out, and the public never knew about them. They just sort of they were never advertised or anything. And so the hardcover got lost.
And I have still to this day, I go to conventions, I still have a couple of the old ones left. And people come to me and they're like, I never knew this was collected. And I'm like, yeah, that's the problem. No one ever knew it was collected.
No one knows. I'm trying to get the word out. Yeah.
So what's great about this new edition is that I'm expanding it. It's like, we had certain editorial choices that had to be made because of like, okay, we need to limit page count and we need to do this and we need to do that. And there's stuff in it that I was like, this could have been so much better. Instead of having 9 panels on this page, I can rearrange this stuff so that we have 4 panels on this and 5 on this, and it reads much clearer and things like that. So I've been able to do that and go in and make it the story that it should have been if it hadn't been, the last part of it hadn't been rushed. So I'm very happy about that. Magnetic Press is doing that Kickstarter. Come on by. There's lots of goodies that if you back, you can get. And it's I'm very, very excited about it.
Brilliant. Well, I will leave it there. Thank you so much, Drew. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you.
Thank you.
I'm hoping to do more of these special Q&A bonus episodes in future, including Q&As on the one-shots we've run here at What Am I Rolling? If you have a question or think of an RPG designer you'd like to see interviewed on this podcast, let us know. Our email address is whatamirollingpodcast@gmail.com. And that's it. Great. Thanks for listening and happy holidays, everyone.